introduce Brother Paul Smith. He's been a friend of mine for many years, since he had to deal with me in the GACS as an assistant, oh, look at that. Bow ties are walking in. I should have worn mine. Brother Paul Smith, he dealt with me as the athletic director at Forest Hills many years ago when we had the school, and he dealt with me then, and we became really good friends. And the Lord has just been a blessing and just been amazing in what He has called him to do. He was a church planting pastor for several years, youth pastor for several more years, and then he was in charge of the GACS for 6 years. The Lord called him into this ministry called Citizen Impact, and what an amazing ministry it is, and especially the opportunity we have really this weekend with things going on, and for him to come and really inform us and tell us what's going on, what's passed, and what we can do to try to encourage more legislation to be passed the right way, and how to inform us. And that's what he believes his ministry is to literally be a go-between for churches, to inform them as to what's going on, how can we protect ourselves more, who can we talk to, how can we talk to them, and that way that we are not taken by surprise when things do go through the House, especially here in the state of Georgia. So I want you to give him your full attention, and I'm thankful for you being here, Brother Paul, and I pray the Lord will use you this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my friend. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this for some time. I certainly appreciate Brother Keaton's friendship. I was excited when y'all called him to be your pastor. I really believe that you've got a good one. You've got a good and godly man here. And we think just the world of him and his family. We're mindful of Miss Amy and all the things she's been going through. In fact, I told him this morning, we came to Georgia almost 12 years ago. 12 years in the end of August, I guess. And that's the first thing I remember, is that she was struggling with her health at that time. I think with her pregnancy. Am I doing something wrong? You guys are confiding that back there like your mic is wrong.
You're in trouble.
Sounds like I'm plenty loud enough. Our ministry is unique. I will concede that. I often tell pastors it doesn't really do justice if you just give me a minute in the service to try to explain it and then go on. The average missionary is going to get up, and they're not going to explain to you what a missionary does, right? They're going to get up and they're going to explain their field and the need of the field. By and large, people get a sense of what a missionary going to a foreign field does. In my case, I am a faith-based ministry. I am supported just like a missionary. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little hesitant to use the term missionary to describe myself because I just have such high regard for those who leave their homes and go overseas and plant a church. That's a wonderful calling and a high calling, and to carry that title, I think I'm not worthy, But I don't want people to misunderstand. I am doing a faith-based mission. I don't draw salary from anywhere. Whatever God's people give us month to month is what our family's been living off of since August of 2010. Some people think Citizen Impact is a national organization that I just happen to be an employee of. I founded it in 2009, and I'm the sole employee, if you want to call it that. I tell people I'm the secretary, I'm IT, I'm sales and marketing, I'm accounts payable, accounts receivable, I'm the receptionist when you call. But we do have some volunteers. That's a blessing that help me out. But it is a faith-based ministry, and about 47 churches do support us on a monthly basis. Mostly they support me out of their mission. Some support us from another account. Obviously it doesn't matter to me, but just want you to get a sense of how that works. But the threefold purpose of Citizen Impact is motivating, monitoring, ministering. All right? I use 3 M's to help us remember it. Motivate. What do I mean by that? Well, it's a preaching ministry. So I'm in 40, 50 churches a year. preaching and challenging folks to look at what's happening in our government, particularly, and really the culture at large, through the lens of Scripture. And it's what I'll be preaching about in the morning service here today. Last Sunday night I was in Lawrenceville. Before that I was down in Hazelhurst. You know where Hazelhurst is? Oh, we got one. Down there nearby Daddy. Does that help you? Down in that part of the state, and primarily I'm in Georgia. Churches that support me are just Georgia churches. Now they'll preach somewhere else if they want me to go. But we're trying to challenge folks to look at things through the Scriptures. And here's my conclusion after 5-6 years of doing this. I believe the average church member in one of our independent Baptist churches thinks that they're doing that, but really are not doing that. And that shows just the value of our ministry. There is a place for it. There is a value in it. In addition to that, we under the motivating or the preaching and educational arm of our ministry, we host a Pastor's Day at the Capitol. We have over 100 come the last time we had a Pastor's Day. And again, there might be one or two exceptions, but by and large, they're independent Baptist pastors. We have a Student Legislative Day for high school juniors and seniors. We hosted over 100 this year in our 2 Student Legislative Days down at the Capitol. We have an annual conference at the end of the summer called Defending Our Religious Liberties. And it's a one-day seminar. We have breakout sessions for pastors, for students, and then a main session, and then it goes into the evening. Last year we had the Atlanta fire chief. You all know that story, that was terminated because he believes in biblical values. Someone said, "Oh, I thought he was fired because he wrote a book." It was the content of the book. If he had wrote a book on gardening, he wouldn't have gotten fired. It was because of what he believes is why he was fired. He was a keynote speaker last year. The year before that, it was Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, if you know who he is, a former congressman. And we'll do that again this year, August 25th. And here's the good part for you all. It's right around the corner from you. My home church is Berean Baptist Church. Right down the street here. That's where we're members. My wife works on staff there. She's an assistant pastor. No, I'm kidding. She's, see if you're listening, she's a bookkeeper over there. And she loves it when I do that. She rolls around. She doesn't usually travel with me because she works full time. And, in fact, she's very involved in the music ministry. I almost brought her this morning, Brother Keith. Thought, well, maybe she could come and do a little special music or something, but she's got a solo this morning at Berean, and it was kind of a change up, and so they had her doing that. Very involved in music ministry. I mean, when we started, my kids were like juniors and seniors over at Killing Hill Christian School, and we just made the decision, Tammy working full time. They just weren't going to travel with me everywhere I go. But now, the oldest is already out of college. My youngest is a senior at PCC, and she's getting married in May. But occasionally they'll travel with me. Occasionally they will go with me. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit on a rabbit trail. But back to the seminar, Berean lets me use their facilities. So I'm able to use their facilities, which if you're familiar with them, very, very nice facilities. And they don't charge Citizen Impact anything for that. So it's great. I'm able to keep expenses down. And so, this would be a good time to give out my prayer card. Let me do that while I'm thinking about it. In fact, maybe a couple of men could help with that. Give out the prayer card. Because, again, I want you to not only to pray for our ministry, but also I want you to use the bottom part of that prayer card and sign up to get on our mailing list. Okay, turn that in today so that I can keep you up to date on what's going on at the Capitol, at the General Assembly, when they're in session. That takes you to point number 2, so first is motivating, the educational and preaching arm. Second, monitoring. So I'm at the Georgia General Assembly when they're in session, monitoring legislation, as what Keith said, for religious liberty concerns, for moral issues, such as pro-life issues, such as, they're trying to bring gambling on horse racing and casinos to Georgia. Y'all know that? So when they have a hearing on that, Just imagine this. Imagine with me for just a second. Imagine this scene. We're down at the Capitol. There's a room packed with about 100 people. 99% of them want to bring casinos or gambling on horse racing to Georgia. They have all spent tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, trying to influence the legislators on that committee, giving money to their campaign or doing other things. And then there's me. And I sit down in that room full of people and try to persuade them why gambling on horse racing or casinos is bad for Georgia. Now let me ask you a question. Do you think I open the Bible and start preaching to them? I don't. What I say to them is, I believe this is a moral issue. And I believe that this issue does not represent the moral values of the majority of Georgians. But then I said, but let me give you the practical problems with this. And I started explaining how crime, corruption, other problems that come along with casinos, what it does to other businesses in the community, what it does, and they, because they're always talking about, well, it'll create jobs. And I say, yes, it will create jobs for law enforcement, for family counselors when homes are being broken up, for gambling addiction counselors. So I'm not preaching to them. I'm saying I'm beginning at a moral basis, but I'm giving them the practical consequences of this. So that's how I do it. And don't misunderstand. In this particular case, there were 2 or 3 other people that also spoke in opposition. The Georgia Baptist Convention, the Southern Baptist, they had a guy kind of like me, and he's, we work on the exact same stuff. Concerned Women for America, if y'all heard of that group, they have a Georgia person here, and we'll work with them. And then a group called Faith and Freedom Coalition, so Ralph Reed's organization, Ralph Reed. So I'm not alone, but we're way outnumbered and unbelievably underfinanced compared to these groups. But that's what we're doing at the Capitol. Let me ask you a quick question. Anybody know how many days per year the General Assembly is actually in session in a calendar year? Most people don't know. I have no idea. You want to take a guess? Take a guess. I'll just take a guess. I'm picking on you. Take a guess. How many days is it?
43?
A month? 43? You guys are actually pretty close. You actually are very close. 40 days. They're in session. They are done this week. They have 2 days left. Tuesday, Thursday, they'll be in session this week, and they're done for the year. Now, I think that's fine. It keeps them out of mischief. But what a lot of people misunderstand is what they're paid. Do you know what they're paid to do that? Come on, take a guess. I'm gonna take a guess. Take a guess. Better take a guess. What do you think? How much? $200,000 a year. What do y'all think? What'd you say? Yeah, 17,500. 17,500 a year. The U.S. congressmen are paid like 170 or 80,000. But these guys are 17,500. So of course they have other jobs, or unless they're retired, or live off their spouse income. But yeah, they're some of them are retired teachers. Some are own their own businesses. Some real estate agents or attorneys or things like that. So yeah, they're really citizen legislators. But in addition to Atlanta, I go to Washington D.C. I'll go last week of April. I'm going to be going. This will be the second trip this year, and I'll go again later in the fall. And I'll meet with the Georgia delegation up there. And in that case, I'm not necessarily going to see the congressmen, but I'll see their staff. Now, I do see congressmen. My congressman is Jody Heiss. He's a great guy. He was a Southern Baptist pastor. Resigned his church, ran for Congress, and now he's representing, this is Loganville towards Athens, down towards Millersville. That's his district. Here you guys have Rob Woodall. And I usually see Congressman Woodall when I'm up there. But the rest of them, I'm trying to see a staff member, someone who has time and will remember me, someone who I can email and the next week and they remember me, and they're the ones who read the bills, So that's what I'm doing in D.C. It's the same issues. So I'm not dealing with Second Amendment rights. I'm not dealing with tax issues and Social Security issues. or immigration. I'm dealing with religious liberty issues, moral issues, pro-life and other things. And to some extent, still Christian education. I have that background with Georgia Association of Christian Schools. And prior to that, South Carolina Association of Christian Schools. I was with them. And by the way, that's where I learned how to do this stuff. In that case, it was for defending the Christian schools, protecting them. Now I do it broader, but that's how I learned how to lobby. That's the word for it, really. So that's kind of all under that monitoring. And the third M is ministering to those who work in the Capital community. Again, my background isn't law or politics. I just studied for the ministry. I went to Pensacola Christian College and studied Bible. Became a youth pastor. All I ever wanted to do, and I was in youth ministry for all total about 18 years doing youth ministry. Really loved that. And the Lord did give us the opportunity to work with the South Carolina Association of Christian Schools in 1996. And to be honest with you, I really thought it'd be temporary. I'll just do this year. I was helping do the youth ministry in the church. It was a startup church. They were only about 3 years old. And so they couldn't afford to bring me on staff. So I thought, well, I'll just do this for a year or two. When the church can hire me on staff. Did it for 7 years. And then they were into some financial troubles, and my position was eliminated. And so we came to Georgia in 2004 to work for the Georgia Association of Christian Schools. And I only tell you that because I want you to know my background is ministry. My heart is ministry. Like he said, I was a pastor for a short time. And, I want to do this as a ministry. I want to do this in a way that's honoring to the Lord. I want these legislators to know that I'm a guy who will pray with them. If they have a need, they can talk to me. I'm a guy who can encourage those who know the Lord. I want to be able to share the gospel with those who don't know the Lord. It really is important to me that it's a ministry. So let me give you a couple of, we changed gears this morning on what I was going to do. And so I want to do things right, and I want to be able to. I'm not going to preach to you in Sunday school. I have a message for the morning service, but I'm going to read a verse of Scripture, and I'm going to finish out. There's no cloud. There it is, up there in the corner. Okay, good. I was at the church. Was it last week, 2 weeks ago? When the time changed, and they hadn't changed the clock. And I'm like, oh, I got an hour and a half. This is great. But that's an old preacher. Nehemiah chapter 4. If you want to turn there, you can. I'm just going to really reference a verse or two. Nehemiah, you know the story of Nehemiah. He's rebuilding the wall. God called him to do that unbelievably difficult task. I mean, just to look at it from a human standpoint, an impossible task. But he undertakes it because he knows that's what God wants. And he runs into opposition, runs into enemies. Anytime you try to do something for the Lord, there are enemies. So chapter 4 deals with that and the enemies that came. In verse 14, he said, I looked and rose up and said unto the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, be ye not afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. And later it goes on to say that, do you remember this story? That they, with one hand they held a sword or a weapon, and with the other hand they did the work. I don't believe that we need to abandon the work of the ministry. I don't believe we need to abandon church work. I don't believe that pastors need to abandon their churches and go do what I'm doing. But folks, we are at a day where with one hand we need to be doing the work of the Lord, and with another hand we need to be fighting the enemies who are trying to stop us.
Right.
And when you think about these religious freedom bills, there was a day, I'm assuming that y'all heard about this in the news, but there was a day when both Republicans and Democrats supported religious freedom. The legislation that is so controversial, that's all over the news, in 1993, the federal government passed that with almost no opposition from anyone. Bill Clinton signed it into law. The state of Illinois has a Religious Freedom Restoration Act that we're trying to get passed here, that state senator Barack Obama voted for in 1998, before he was even a U.S. senator. But not today. Because there are enemies that want to stop us. There are enemies that want to shut us down. There's enemies that despise what we're doing here this morning, having church. And what they're willing to concede is, if you just keep it within the four walls of this church, then you can do what you want. But that's not what our First Amendment guarantees, is it? It guarantees the free exercise of religion. That means we can exercise it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in our churches, in our schools, at our jobs, wherever. But what they want to call it, instead of freedom of worship, freedom of religion, they say freedom of worship. And that implies just what's in these four walls of the building. And if that's all you want and you're satisfied with that, then you don't need to fight. But I'm not satisfied with that. And we need to fight. And we need to, with one hand, do the work that the Lord's called us to do, with the other hand, fight our enemies. These religious freedom bills, and I have some handouts on the back table right there, that describe, there's 3 different religious freedom bills, and there's a little chart that might help you with that, and another one-page handout that describes the 3 bills, 1, 2, 3, that have really been combined. The Pastor Protection Act. Pastor Protection Act, among other things, specifically is for pastors. The clergy member does not have to perform a religious ceremony, contrary to his or her religious belief. If it's a woman minister, she probably doesn't mind doing a same-sex marriage, but nevertheless, it's written broadly that way on purpose. It's not going to say, a Baptist preacher. It's going to say, clergy. The problem with that, just protecting pastors, is, number one, it sets a bad precedent. Think about another First Amendment right. Let's say the freedom of press or freedom of speech. There's also another part of the First Amendment a lot of people don't remember, to petition the government for the redress of grievances. Today we might say lobby. Should the other parts of the First Amendment only apply to the professionals, or does it apply to all Americans? Should lobbying be only for those who are professional lobbyists, or should you be able to approach your legislators and talk to them? So it's a bad precedent to say, well, the professional clergy, they get their First Amendment protected, but the rest of you, forget about it. That's a bad precedent. Not to mention, we want the shepherd to be protected, but what about the sheep, right? Right. So that bill is not enough. The other bill is the First Amendment Defense Act. This really was born out of this was created really as a need to address the Supreme Court changing the definition of marriage last summer. Because of that, now there are those who say, well, if you don't accept that, if you don't accept this new definition of marriage, you're a bigot. There's a UGA professor, and I don't have this article on my table, but I have it in my box if anybody wants a copy. A University of Georgia professor that 1 week wrote an article, 1 week after that Supreme Court decision, saying now Christian schools should be stripped of their tax-exempt status if they don't embrace this new definition of marriage, meaning hire, lesbians and homosexuals and all that. If they still maintain that position on marriage, they should lose their tax-exempt status. And by extension, any Christian ministry who doesn't accept that. This is not a professor at Harvard. This is not a professor at the University of California at Berkeley. This is a professor in Athens, Georgia at UGA. Who, by the way, is down at the Capitol regularly lobbying for these kinds of things. First Amendment Defense Act would protect people, not just pastors, all Georgians, so that they couldn't be discriminated against based on their view of marriage. And again, the way they wrote it, it's either view of marriage. Whether you have a traditional view of marriage, whether you believe in the new definition of marriage. A Christian school can't lose their tax-exempt status or accreditation, can't lose a government contract, you can't be discriminated against your job, or the government can't, persecute you if you're in the wedding business, a photographer, a baker, and you decline to do a same-sex ceremony. That's the First Amendment Defense Act. And finally, there's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which I've already alluded to. This is what's been on the federal government side since 1993. But in 1997, the Supreme Court ruled, here's the gist of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It essentially says if government is going to pass a law that restricts your religious freedom, if they're going to incorporate some sort of regulation that would restrict your freedom of religion, they must have a very compelling reason, and they have to do it the least restrictive way possible. I know that's legalese, so let me try to explain it in another way. Last year, I went to Washington, D.C. with a pastor who knew someone who works at the Pentagon. And he let him know that he was coming up, and he said, hey, why don't you go to the Pentagon? I'll give you guys a tour. So this pastor and I and his son, we went to the Pentagon. And he was showing us around. It was neat. I'd never been there before. And he took us by the press office, the Pentagon press office, Department of Defense press office. You've probably seen it on TV. Big emblem on the front, guys speaking on answering questions. And he told us this: the press are here every day. Makes sense. He said, and they can go anywhere they want in the Pentagon. I thought, well, that's interesting because I can't go anywhere I want. You can't go anywhere you want. And then he added this, it really surprised me. He said, and they can ask any question of anybody they want here. I was shocked. What about our national security? I mean, you know what? We don't want our enemies to know what's going on at the Pentagon, put it in the newspaper, right? But he added this that clarified. He said, but they can't publish anything they want. I'm like, there it is. They can't publish anything that would hurt our national security. So, with the First Amendment right of freedom of the press, when it comes to our national security, they can restrict the freedom of the press, but they have to have a really compelling reason. Obviously, our national security is a pretty compelling reason. And they have to do it the least restrictive way possible. And in the case of the Pentagon, the least restrictive ways: let them go where they want, let them ask what they want, but at the very end, before they publish anything, we've got to make sure it wouldn't clue our enemies into something they don't need to know. Well, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act gives that same kind of protection to freedom of religion. I think the best example may be in Florida, where the city of Tampa passed an ordinance that said you can't feed the homeless outdoors. Now, if you think about that for a minute, would a city have a good reason, a compelling reason to restrict feeding homeless people outdoors? Yeah, sanitation issues and other things, they wanted you to do it indoors. Well, the pastor down there in Tampa had always done that. He'd always taken food to the homeless outdoors, and he continued to do so because he believed that's what God wanted him to do. Well, he got arrested and had to go to court. His attorney used the Florida Religious Freedom Restoration Act in his defense and said, this law restricts his religious freedom unnecessarily. And the judge said, you're right, and found in favor of the pastor. He said, yes, there's a compelling reason, but the city did not do it the least restrictive way possible. And because Florida has a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the pastor prevailed, and he won the case. Well, Georgia has no such protection. In fact, federal inmates in prison in Georgia have more religious freedom protection than you do. So the Religious Freedom Restoration Act would establish that on the state level for us. Again, it's already on the federal level. That's what Hobby Lobby used when they won in the Supreme Court a year or two ago, when they appealed having to give abortion-inducing drugs pay for that through their health care program at Hobby Lobby. You remember that case? They used the federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So what passed this last week here in Georgia was a combination of the three bills I just described to you. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the Pastor Protection Act, and then some of the language of the First Amendment Defense Act. What they would not pass and what they would not let us have is in that First Amendment Defense Act portion of the bill. Specific protection for businesses. They said, we'll protect pastors, we'll protect Christian schools and other nonprofits. But if you're a for-profit business, then your First Amendment rights of freedom of religion are not going to be covered by the state. So they thought that that would minimize the backlash from the business community, who described that as a license to discriminate. So we sat down with some of these folks I've already mentioned, and the sponsors of the religious freedom bills. You know, these are the good guys. And we discussed, can we accept this compromise? And, in our religious world, in our independent Baptist world, we don't like compromise, right? And we shouldn't compromise the scriptures, right? We shouldn't compromise the beliefs that we have. But our political system is entirely built on compromise. It's all about compromise. They get nothing done without compromise. So we know that. So we're trying to look at this in a reasonable way. And the sponsor of the state senator, Josh McCoon, who has been, no one has fought more for religious freedom in Georgia than Senator Josh McCoon. He's a great guy. He felt like this would be good to accept, and that this would move the ball forward, if you will, give us significant protection, although it doesn't go as far as we would like it to go. And we pretty much all agree. We pretty much all agree. It's tough, and you want more, and you feel like, well, with the climate in America today, with the wind at the backs of the LGBT people, the wind in our faces pushing against us, the winds of culture is what I'm trying to say here. Should we make sure that we get all we can get because we might not get another chance? Well, that's one way to look at it. Or should we, the other way to look at it is, should we abandon everything because we didn't get everything? You get that? You get where we're at? So we feel like this is good. We feel like this is progress. We feel like this, with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act portion, although it doesn't explicitly protect businesses like we'd like to see in the First Amendment Defense Act, with the religious freedom part of it, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, businesses would have an avenue of appeal. They would have a way to appeal. So if you remember from your civics class, a bill is introduced in the House. Once it passes the House, then it has to pass the Senate. Or vice versa. It starts in the Senate, has to pass the Senate and the House, and then signed by the governor. So it passed both chambers, House and Senate, and it's sitting on Governor Deal's desk. And he has until May 3rd to either sign it or veto it. But one way that Georgia is different than the federal government, in the federal government, if the president doesn't sign it or veto it, you know what happens to the bill?
Goes into law.
Not on the federal side. No, they call that a pocket veto. Right? But on the state, you're right. On the state level, it does go into law. And so, I think I might now you got me questioning. I do know on the state level, if he does nothing, it becomes law. Okay? I think he'll do something. He knows that this is a hard-fought compromise, and but though there are those, you all maybe subscribe to some mailing list from some conservative Christian groups out of D.C., they're against it because it doesn't go far enough. And those on the LGBT side and all those activists, they're against it. So both sides are against this, and that tells me it's probably a good compromise because neither extremes are happy. That means it's probably not a bad compromise. Okay. So I want to be able to take some questions about that and try to field those questions. Brother Keith, do I have until 10:30?
Yeah, that's fine.
He was gonna say 10:25 till he realized it's 10:25 more. But I want to give you, I have some other examples of things that our ministry has been able to do and been able to accomplish. And maybe I'll get a chance to explain that to you in a subsequent service. I'm going to preach in the morning service. I'll be back tonight. And we're going to be talking tonight about America's Christian heritage. But I do want you to know that I do want to open up for questions here. But I do have some materials on the back table. I have some handouts on these religious freedom bills. I have some books and other materials. The handouts are free. The books and other materials are not. So take a look at that. But if it makes you feel any better, proceeds from the sales of these books go to help needy children attend Christian college. Mine. So, any questions about what I've talked about here, Sunday school or these Sunday schools, about my ministry or these bills? Sir.
I don't think you mentioned that, but the moral issue of breweries in the state of Georgia.
I haven't mentioned that. I haven't really gotten into that. That's a dicey area. I did fight against the Sunday sales of alcohol a few years ago, but these microbreweries.
Yeah.
My Christian friends and the legislators, they've said just stay out of that. That's really a war between big breweries and little microbreweries, and sometimes you just let them entities beat each other and don't stick your head in the middle of it. Like two dogs fighting, sometimes not worth trying to break it up. That's a terrible illustration. You come out more bloody, right? All right, questions? I thought we had a question about the bill again.
So currently, right now in Georgia, there's no protection for a business owner if they were to, like what happened with that baker.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, because here's what's different about Georgia. Those states where you've heard about the baker, the photographer, the florist, they all have in their states statewide protection for people based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Georgia has no such law. So as it is today, without this religious freedom bill even, you don't have to serve it as a business person. Now, let's be honest. I'm not sure that's great business practice to turn people away when you want to sell them a cake. But I do think they should have the right to not participate in an event that's a violation of their faith. So right now you can do it anyway. But that really is the whole problem with all of this. The reason why they're fighting us is because they want to get these SOGI laws, S-O-G-I, sexual orientation, gender identity, passed here in Georgia. And the biggest hindrance to those SOGI laws are religious freedom. I mean, who's the biggest group of people that's going to fight against these SOGI laws? People with faith. So they need to restrict our freedom so that they can get these laws passed. But technically here in Georgia, you can decline them service today. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't clarify that. I needed to clarify that. And by the way, well, I won't get into all that, but there's a really good illustration about this that I don't have time to share, but there's a difference between declining a person's service. I'm not going to serve you because of your race or whatever, and not doing an event, right? I mean, you wouldn't, none of us, I think it's okay for a Christian business owner or any business owner to say, we don't serve blacks here in our cafeteria. Nobody wants that. But should a black photographer be compelled to take photos at a Ku Klux Klan rally? Of course not. And that's really what we're talking about. Not serving someone at the counter, but participating in an event. Right? All right, another follow-up.
Here recently in New York, they were talking about transgender bathrooms and all that. Is there anything protecting us in Georgia?
There's nothing compelling us first. So I had a pastor contact me because he had a transgendered man show up at his church. And this pastor was very kind, very gracious. He said, Paul, anyone is welcome to attend our church. Anyone is free to sit and listen to the gospel. We want to reach people. But after the service, this guy wearing a dress asked one of the men in the back, where's the bathroom? And the pastor said, Paul, what's our obligations then? I said, you have no obligation. There's no law in Georgia that says you have to accommodate that guy and let him use the women's restroom. He said, well, what we decided to do is we cleared out the ladies' restroom and said, you know, you can use that one. And they made sure there were no girls in there or anybody else. But guess what? God didn't do it. God didn't go into that. He left. He said, Paul, I'm convinced it was a setup. But I said, well, don't worry, because there's no law that says you have to accommodate. And I told him, you did fine what you did. I'm not an attorney, but that's where we're headed. That's where we're headed. That's exactly where we're headed. And the thing of it is, part of what we have trouble with is messaging. So the other side spends a lot more money on messaging than we do. We tend to say, well, it's just the right thing to do. Why do we have to say it the right way? Well, because of news media and everybody, and they'll characterize it bad for us no matter what. But what the other side has done is it's all about discrimination, and they've co-opted that word, and they made it about love and all the touchy-feely stuff, and they're beating our brains in because of it, and they're advancing their cause because of it. But when it comes to men using the women's bathroom, we're winning that side. We're winning that today. And it's because we got to characterize it that way. They want to say, no, this is not a man using the women's restroom. He's a woman. He got man parts, don't he? He ain't a woman if he got man parts. Oh, no, he's a woman. No man's going to go in there. It's a woman. That ain't a woman. And like one preacher said, I got a 6-year-old daughter. He said, the guy wearing a dress follows her in the bathroom. I ain't preacher anymore. I'm daddy. And we win that one. We on the public opinion, it's on our side on that one. But we could probably do a little bit better job messaging on the other issue. But every media outlet, all Hollywood and everybody else, all helps them with their messaging. All right, I gotta quit. Preacher's coming down. I'm gonna turn off my mic. I'll be back at my back table. I'll answer questions. I'll help you with the handouts if you have questions about that. Got books and materials. But thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. Looking forward to preaching in the morning service.
Thank you. Make sure you catch your mic off. Exactly. Well, we got to, it's